everybody, and welcome to the Beverly Center. We are so happy and excited to have you here today. We are the education series for the Costume Designers Guild, which is IATSE 892, and I'm the president of the guild. And we thank our incredible hosts, as well as Bloomingdale's, for providing the amazing grazing table. I'm sure you've all hit it because it's looking a little empty. But if you have not tried it yet, please do. It's all local produce with imported cheeses, charcuterie, healthy dips, rustic crackers, fruit, and more. It's really delicious. I know because I'm eating it now. So Bloomingdale's is raffling off 3 great prizes, so please visit their table and check it out. Right there. Wave. Hello. They also have special discounts. Special discounts for everyone here today. So I also want to thank Don Londres Tequila for being our sponsored beverage and providing delicious cocktails. Also, I'm drinking one of those now. And we also want to thank Dre London, Post Malone's manager, and the legendary Francisco Gonzalez and the Gonzalez family, 2 self-made icons bringing together culture and legacy through taste. And they are tasty. So, of course, we appreciate the wonderful partnership we've always had with the Beverly Center. And I especially want to give a shout out to Celia Sodre right here. Oh, there she is, for putting this all together for us and hosting this series. I'd also like to acknowledge my vice president, Ivy Thade, who is working at District 2 right now, working hard for our negotiations and keeping us all on track. And our education director for creating this event, she and Anna Wyckoff, our communications director, is always there to support us. And she's just amazing. So anyway, please welcome our host today for today's panel, Designing the Lead, Embodying Iconic Female Characters. I'm proud to present Miss Tracy Gigi Field, costume designer for the first season of Poker Face. And there she is.
Thank you to the Beverly Center for hosting this event with us. We really appreciate it. You are always supporting costume designing and costume designers, and we love you for it. So thank you. Today's panel is a collection of female costume designers and assistant costume designers who embodied iconic female characters in each of their shows. From the late 1960s, 70s to contemporary silhouettes, these teams each lead signature looks that captivated audiences and drove the narrative. Please welcome our panelists, costume designer Vera Chow, costume designer Sarah Evelyn, and ACD Annie Loppert from Netflix Griselda, costume designer Alex Friedberg from Apple Plus Palm Royale, costume designer Allison Fanger from Peacock's Apples Never Fall, and costume designer Lou Eyrich from Feud, Capote versus the Swans. What a year for television, right, everybody? With some of the shows adapted from books, we have 2 set in the sunny beach fashion of West Palm Beach. So from the late 1960s of High Society Country Club on Apple Plus, Palm Royale, that's Alex, everybody, to the contemporary upper middle class of Peacock's Apples Never Fall. That's Allison, you guys. Then we enter the underworld of drugs, gangs, and the incredible sophisticated matriarch in the 1970s miniseries Griselda. That's our 2 ladies right here, Sarah and Annie. And of course, we need to discuss the posh New York high society of the 1960s and 70s. And that is Feud, Capote versus the Swans, which is Lou. And you are somewhere on this page, Vera Show, the brother's son. All right, let's move it along, shall we? All right. Alex, you have many star-studded ladies who all have had great shows of their own. With this ensemble cast, can you tell us how are you able to keep their individualism while staying in the world?
How was I able to create their individualism? Starting with palette, usually, and then of course, in prior shows that I've done, we've started with playlists for each character. We start, of course, in the research phase, and you really sort of try to extract clues from where socioeconomically they live, where they've grown up, what their influences are. And so I start usually with number one on the call sheet. In this case, it was Kristen Wiig, and she was desperate to bust into this world of high society in Palm Beach. So she grew up worshiping these ladies that she's trying to infiltrate. And as an outsider, she would try really, really hard to fit in. And that would mean, in this case, sort of a Lily Pulitzer kind of palette, cottons, skirts that were slightly too short. She never quite got or Allison Janney character, who was kind of the queen bee of the show. So making distinct decisions in terms of palette, fabrication, print, and looking within that, each scene, you take individual scenes and say which one of these ladies is in service to the dialogue first, or which one of these ladies has to shine or sing, or which dress has to be the most obvious.
Okay.
Right.
And in terms of like color palette, did you each character had their own palette?
Yeah.
And with the 1960s, you were able to do huge pops of color?
Yeah. A lot of pops of color everywhere you look. In Palm Beach, Florida, where color, and more color.
And print.
And
Lots of print.
And print. And 1960s psychedelic prints at that.
Awesome.
But we were able to sort of siphon out more of a pastel palette for Kristen Wiig, and then more of a kind of peacock jewel tone for Allison Janney, some sort of salmons and greens and sage for the Carol Burnett character. We did take 2 or 3 colors and sort of designate them and dull them down or dial them up depending on the scene.
Awesome. And then I noticed in the show that everything is so period correct, from like the undergarments to the jewelry to the purses. Was it hard to source that stuff? Were you able to find it easily?
I mean, I had probably the greatest crew in the whole entire world. I know everyone's going to say this on this panel, but we are only just a very, very small part of the costume team. And I had just insanely great shoppers who had wonderful resources, an unbelievably great assistant designer, Lee Bell, who unfortunately is not here today. And they were out scavenging, and they would send big booklets of mood boards and fabric samples and color ideas. And, our beacon was Slim Aaron. So most people understood a Slim Aaron's aesthetic. And they would send us boxes of just treasures. So yes, it was hard, but also just probably the most fun I think any of us have ever had in a long time.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm sure your crew really appreciates you shouting them out.
Oh, God.
So Sarah and Annie, you're up next. As a team, can you tell us how you were able to transition the beautiful Sofia Vergara into the character Griselda?
I think that, like, everything starts with research. It was one of those projects where I started and the project started kind of long before Sofia started. And when I came to the project, they hadn't yet quite figured out what the world was going to be, which I like coming to a project like that best because you get to really get involved. So, and I wasn't sure what Sofia was going to want to do. I knew that this was her project. I knew she was really into it. I knew that she was going to want to have like a very dramatic turn, that she really cared about this story, but I wasn't sure how far she was going to want to go. And plus, you can't really like mask a person like Sophia to look like someone else. And unless you're just going to have like a face full of prosthetics, and I think we all felt like that wasn't going to be the way to go with her. So I started with a lot of research. This was a woman that was different than me. She was, in the 1970s, she grew up poor in Colombia. And what would she have looked like? And research came from a lot of places. We hired a cultural consultant. There was a costumer actually who was from her same town in Colombia, and she happened to be going there over Christmas break. So she found like original source material.
That's amazing.
It was
such good luck.
beyond, I couldn't believe it. So we had this amazing, and we had a couple other consultants as well. So we had this amazing kind of place to start from where I could even like imagine myself as this character. And so I got to the fitting, as you do with all my ideas, but that's kind of the moment where you have to figure out how your actress works, because that's like really important too. It's not going to be everything I wanted. So I knew that this was a woman who had been looking at specific things in the 60s and 70s in Colombia. I knew that she was driven. I knew that hitman culture, in terms of clothing, meant that people were a bit flashy. Like they wanted to show a power in their clothing that they didn't feel that they have in society. So all of this made me feel like she'd be put together. She would be sexy. That's part of the Griselda story, maybe turning like sexuality on its head to make it your own power. And she would be put together. So I started there, and we had a huge, we had a room of like a bunch of racks of different kind of things, where I really felt like we found the character and we found the tone of the grit. Because it's just like, how much are we going to change her? How gritty are we going to go? Because still, it's a story about Miami. And the story, besides about Griselda, it's really about how Miami was built on the drug trade, and all of it was very flashy. So you need this flashy, and it's the 70s, so you also need glamour and sexy. So anyways, Sophia got in the fitting, and I feel like it was there when she started putting on Diane von Furstenberg wrap dresses. We saw the character. And what was so cool was I feel like Diane von Furstenberg was really modern woman dressing. It was dressing day to night, go to work, go out to drinks, have sex, put it on again,
The iconic wrap dress.
Yeah, it was like bananas. And she looked great in it, but it also felt true to the character, right? The thing is, she was a person who didn't want to plan it all out. She didn't want to have fittings all the time. She kind of wanted to feel like she was going into her own closet, which meant that
you never knew what she was going to wear. That sounds frightening.
We had stunts and mults and all the things.
Oh, yeah.
So really what that meant was figuring out what her progression was going to be, when we were going to start to progress, and getting things on the rack that were amazing in the mornings. And I'd say that's kind of where it's all key on an amazing like ACD. You can have a million great ideas, but if you don't have a killer ACD and a killer crew, those great ideas are going to be nothing. So maybe I like turn it over to Annie a little bit and talk about how she did all that.
Your turn, Annie.
Oh man. We had stunts, and so we would find a great Diane von Furstenberg dress that was vintage. And how can we take this, and how can Griselda be running and doing what she needs to do? So it would kind of be the process of then like, we have this idea and she wants a couple ideas on the day. Let's get it in the works. Let's get fabric. How does the fabric look vintage? How can we make it and age it and have, we had an amazing made to order costumer that would go all over. And if we couldn't find the fabric, were we going to print it? Were we going to paint it to really get the essence of the color palette? And also, because we didn't like necessarily know what she was going to wear until the day of, really making sure that like we had a change deck where we knew what everyone else, the principal cast, was wearing that day. So it's like, everyone's in brown. Do we want to go tonal? Is this the mood for it? Like, what are we going to present to Sophia that day? And also in the 80s, accessories were huge. And for it to be flashy and powerful, how are we going to set up the accessories to create this outfit on the day, in the moment? From there, are we going to have to molt it? Are we going to have to how are we going to recreate it?
How many items did you have to recreate?
We recreated everything.
Wow.
So in just about, we had a couple. In the fitting, we would have incredible silhouettes that would be sourced by the shoppers, sent in, found, and it would be incredible, but it would be like, oh, it has holes in it, or it doesn't quite fit correctly, or we can't have brown, we need to have green. And so then we would go from that starting point.
So you didn't go to the 1970 store and buy 5 of the same dresses? You didn't do that? That doesn't exist? No?
Unfortunately, we didn't go to the Beverly Center.
Okay, great. Is there anything else about your process you'd like to share?
No, I think it was just then kind of on the day being organized that once she was there, we allotted enough time to have that moment where you're almost doing like a 15-20 minute check fit every time she's establishing a new outfit, which in the show she established a lot of new outfits, making sure Sarah was there, so that on top of making sure like Sarah saw background and the other actors and everything, still giving Sophia the time and the attention that like her outfit needed to go on camera.
Doesn't sound stressful at all. Not one bit. If you've ever been on a set, you know that this is kind of terrifying. But show looks great. So well done, ladies. The next question is also for Sarah and Annie, and that is the period had amazing prints and fits and colored, like you guys were speaking about. But when it came to the look for Griselda, her clothing was not overtly sexual all the time. Was that intentional?
Yeah. I mean, like, if we just went overtly sexual, it would be such a callback to Modern Family. So I think we really had to stay away from that. And yes, it was form fitting. I wanted to say there's one other thing that, like, she was one of those actors that's very visceral. Like, it wasn't even totally what it looked like. It was like what it felt like. And so things would be form fitting. But I think that's right. We didn't just want to be sexual. We wanted to be modern, but we didn't just want to be sexual. And also her choice of the prosthetic was just like taking down her eyebrows, making her nose and teeth a little weird. And I sort of feel like we tried to do the same, just little shift in the clothing. Not super, super high heels. Not that there even were towering heels then so much. Not super, super high heels. A little bit more lady heel, you know, a little bit more pants, stuff like that.
Sort of like powerful looks.
Yeah.
Yes. In a world of men at the time.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, so the next question is for Allison. So you shot in Australia and it was meant to be Florida. Can you tell us how you were able to keep Annette Bening and her family true to the American vibe of West Palm Beach?
Well, that was a challenge for sure, because Australia does not look like Florida at all. And it was also a challenge because Florida is such a distinct Americana culture. I think it's so interesting to be here with Alex because we both did Florida in different time periods, but in such a different way. I really love doing families. And because this is a family, I expected it to be a little more highly stylized than we ended up doing it. They were very sort of a middle-class family. And we wanted them to feel true to their athleticism. Like, I feel like the core and the fiber of that family was that they were a sports family. So a lot of what I developed character-wise for each of them was about sports. Like I know we're talking about women, but Stan, he dressed almost as though he was always going to a sporting event. And when he wasn't going to coach or be home or be on the court, he looked a little out of place, the way a coach will look when they're at like a banquet, you know, when we did the family. So for Annette's character, because it was Florida and because I did the color in Florida is so important. And yet this family was a sports family. We had to find the line and also the thread that kept them together as a family and connected them. And that had to be the sports. But for Annette, her palette ended up being and working in a more traditional Americana vibe, and also sports colors, like the color of Fila, red and white and navy. And we would throw in some camel and kind of like not as high as Ralph Lauren, but more like Tommy Hilfiger level, because they were above all a middle class family. And we wanted her to feel grounded, relatable. She never really stood out in her color because she was the force behind the family. She was the one behind the curtain to propel her family, which was such an important element of the story of her character, that she was sort of the overlooked person amongst the family. The one time we used color on her really strongly, which is over there, is that really bright blouse that she wore to the retirement party, because it was her one moment to shine. And I worked with the DP and the director, and we made the whole room. It was a room full of people. It was a retirement party, and they were all, we muted the BG, we hazed it out. The lighting, he brought in a lot of smoke and fog. I know how much we all love that. But it was sort of hazy. And then she was sort of this bright beacon in the middle of it all, because it was her moment. And that was kind of the only time I really used that kind of a color on her. So that was fun. And then, with the other characters, again, it had to be Florida, but it had to be sports. So color became a whole thing. Like with Troy, also, I know not a female, but he had this really understated elegance to him. His clothing was quite expensive, but nothing was logoed. Conversely to Stan, where everything was logoed. And they were both so ego driven, but in completely different ways, because that's what happens in a family, so everybody's related in a certain way and yet different. And I always like to borrow clothes in a family. I like to have one family member take from another family member's closet. I did that a lot with Brooke. Brooke was the closest to her father, Stan. So she sort of dressed the most like him, the most sporty, like a contemporary female, more stylish version of a Coach, if you will, like cool track pants and shirts that I felt that she took from his closet also. Those were the overshirts. And I don't know, did I lose my way on the question?
You're fine.
You know what I'm talking about.
You answered it completely.
Okay, good.
Completely.
Okay,
Good job.
Okay.
So were there any custom builds in your show, or were you able to actually find everything in Australia that you were looking for?
No. Australia was really challenging to shop. First of all the brands are different. It was like learning a new language. There really wasn't, and especially where we were shooting, which was on the Gold Coast, which is quite gorgeous. It was one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And I felt so blessed to get to spend time there. But the shopping was like shopping in Cancun. It was like a vacation town. Just wasn't anything there that would work at all. And nothing really had any, everything I like, whenever a shopper comes back or whenever I'm in a store, I'm looking for pieces that have a point of view, that say something, that give me an indication of character and story and narrative. And everything would come back. There's racks and racks of clothes that said nothing.
So what did you do? I'm so curious.
Flew to Sydney.
There you go.
Several times, shopped on the weekends, tried to find boutique, interesting stores, tried to do vintage. That was challenging. It doesn't really even exist there, to be honest. Right?
Wow.
There just isn't vintage. There's like thrift, but it's different. There were a few pieces. Christine, my amazing ACD, who was here, who was incredible, and I would have literally died if she wasn't there. Did find a cool vintage store in Byron Bay, like an hour away, which we used. We used pieces from them. Yes.
Speaking of vintage, can I move on to a character that you dressed?
Yes.
So Amy's boho chic. Were you able to find some vintage pieces for her, or
no? No, I did find pieces for her. Funny story. Did end up flying to Boulder, Colorado during shooting for my daughter's college graduation. She's here right now. And shopped while I was there. shopped in Boulder. I was like, this is an Amy place.
Perfect.
And really, I tried to find an Amy too. I want to make a point that Amy to me was not just straight up bohemian hippie girl. I really try to find the depth and the layers and the details of spirituality or someone on a journey rather than going into straight up bohemian, like Indian block print, like what you kind of expect from the Govinda store. You really need to look outside of that and find the details of the character. Her jewelry was sort of like brutalistic jewel tone jewelry, and her clothes, her jewelry became important because I feel like jewelry pieces are so personal, and they had to have meaning for her because she was sort of this amongst the family. She was the one who was, on her own path more than the rest of them. So she had to really have a spirituality to her look and sort of a lostness too. Like I bounced around a little bit in her look, like not full on, but her pieces were very, I don't know, just very like, I just like to find all the different pieces of that person because I feel like you can really fall into a stereotype with that. It's like much like I did, with Frankie. She couldn't just feel straight up hippie girl lady. So
it's nice to pull from all sorts of like places, stores, things that someone has given you.
Yeah. I had a full-time shopper in Los Angeles too, the entire time.
That was helpful.
Yeah, I had to. It was an American show. It
Right.
was a very American show. It was a Florida show, but it was in Australia. So that's what it took.
So I know we all hate this question, but who is your favorite character to dress from the show?
I hate that question because they all really are. And it sounds stupid, but they become, when I'm doing a show, when I'm on a project, these characters become like my children. And I think about them all the time. And I love them all equally in their own special ways. And I'm not just saying that, I swear. I like go out and I'm shopping. I might be shopping for one character. And just like I did when my kids were little, like I'd be like, oh, this is so good for so-and-so. I just like, I'm always thinking of them. They're always in the back of my mind because they all have their beautiful moments. Like even Stan with his stupid golf shirts. Like, it's like, yeah, but he loved that Fila jacket, and let's get him more two-piece tracksuits. I don't know. I just really love I love helping to tell the story above all else. So, and when I get a script and I get some characters that are well written, it's all in there. It's like I color them in my mind as I read a script. And that's when I know, when I'm able to color them in with my mind, when I read a script, that's when I know that these are characters that I want to be a part of telling the story of.
I love that. Yeah. As a costume designer, when you read a script, you always want to be able to visualize it in your head. Otherwise, it's probably not the job for you.
And sometimes you can't. And it really depends. I've even said sometimes to a writer after, even if I'm on a job, I'll be like, I'm not sure about this one person. They're like, yeah, because there's no information in there. They know,
Totally agree. All right, Lou, it's your turn. For all of you who don't know, I used to be Lou's assistant very many years ago.
She's a great assistant.
Thanks, everybody. You've designed so many things with strong leading ladies, American Horror Story, Ratched, Scream Queens, just to name a few. So how was this particular show, Feud Capote versus the Swans, with its all-star female cast, series different than the others you have designed?
It really wasn't that, like, it wasn't a new muscle that I had to use in any way. It was more, I hadn't done it in New York, and it was a whole new crew. And so getting used to that. But I got lucky and had the A team there. It was also kept growing. Like you sign on to a show and then it gets bigger and bigger. And I didn't get as much prep time for this one.
Do we ever?
No. And so I kind of went in already behind. But there was a lot of good research on the Swans. And Ryan Murphy has been obsessed with the Swans since I started with him 24 years ago. So I pretty much knew who all the swans were, so that was a little easier. And Slim Aaron books, that was like our Bible as well, because all of the swans had been photographed. So that, to answer your question, there really wasn't anything different about this process for me, except that it was truncated in New York.
Okay. So how close did you stay, because the characters were based off of historical figures? How close did you stay to how they actually looked and dressed?
We tried to stay really, really close. The problem was that Truman Capote was 5'5", and Tom Hollander, who played Capote, was 5'7", and all of our actresses were not that much taller. So we really tried to stay true. We searched everywhere for vintage. We did make to order too, but was trying to make the women appear taller without having to put them in high heels, which they would not have worn in the 60s and early 70s. So we would try to just cheat it off camera, when they were in two shots. But that was the trickiest thing. Also, because we were depicting a story of the jet set society, and it was a dying way of life, because disco started coming in, punk rock started coming in, everybody became a much more casual way of dressing. And a couple of our episodes, it was about couldn't find a hat store anymore, couldn't find gloves in the department store, and it just where people weren't dressing anymore. So we couldn't use fur. Disney doesn't use fur. And I hadn't known that, and we had collected beautiful furs that these women would have worn. And so I was disappointed, not that I'm a big fur advocate, but when we're telling a story, it was really needed. But we quickly adjusted, and every fur trim, collar, shawl, coat was made from faux fur. So I learned a lot.
And then do you have a favorite look from that show? Favorite costume?
I don't have a favorite. First of all, I can hardly remember them because there were so many, and it was a while ago and many shows ago. But it was more about, I think it was the scene in the storyline in episode 2. There were 2 Thanksgivings going on. There's a Thanksgiving that CZ Guest threw in Florida, and then Joanne Carson threw the Thanksgiving in Bel Air. And they really depicted the 2 different sets of people attending. And that for me was really fun, doing those 2 storylines.
Thank you. It was like opposites. Okay, so Vera, you're up. Yeah, I know. Have to go after Lou. It's awful.
After that.
I know. So Michelle Yeoh's character, Eileen, she becomes the key to the whole organization, even though she's only in the first couple of episodes. And she's the head of the largest gang in Taiwan. So can you talk about your process for her journey through the series, and her working class mom look to the incredible white suit look that she wears at the end of the series?
When I first started with it, Michelle was the last person to get on, so that was very terrifying. I wanted to build everyone around her, but I couldn't. We had no prep time for her, and she was fresh off all the publicity from Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it was sort of a similar backstory for both of these shows. And Shirley Kurata did such an amazing job on portraying her character in Everything Everywhere, and I had to do my best to erase that image because it was so easy to fall into that Chinatown, St. Gabriel Valley mom. We've all seen them with the beautiful hats and the strollers and the trolleys and everything. I had to erase Shirley, and it was difficult. And then the good thing is when we finally got Michelle, she had sometimes when you get a number 1, everything they're thinking about is not what you were thinking about. And you're like, oh, I have to do this all over again. But she had very good insights on it. And then we talked a lot about taking away the American Asian aspect and actually just thinking about the Asian aspect, because she did come from Taiwan. She wasn't born and bred in America. So that's when I pivoted to my parents. They're my unpaid interns.
Perfect.
Yeah, because they're back and forth, Hong Kong, Taiwan, China. So they would send me all these photos. Like, they would sneak photos of people from the subways. And then I would put it on my presentations and send it to Netflix.
Perfect.
And then my parents would be like, where are these pictures going? And I'm like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And they were really good. And then, Michelle was like, I also have a jade guy in China. And I'm like, we don't have the money for your jade guy in
No
China.
money. No money for that. I hope you gave your parents a shout out and a thank you for helping you design your show.
I didn't. My parents designed the show. It was basically that. That's basically them. And they have sent me stuff before. I've done other shows in Asia where my parents would be like, there's a package coming. And it's just stuff.
They're the best.
There's stuff you can't find here. So I'll use them. And those were always the pieces and the references that really resonated with Michelle. We used a lot of the contrast between wovens and knits to kind of slowly evolve her character. Like, character design is very subliminal, right? You're hoping that the people see the characters change without them knowing. Like, there's a makeover montage. Like, we hate a makeover montage. Like,
Want it to be like a natural art.
yes, you don't want them to see it. So we went from really soft knits, and eventually it went to chiffon and then silk. And then that's when the white suit came in towards the end. I am jumping all over the place, I know. But then with the white suit, traditionally in many Asian countries, that's actually a color for only funerals.
It symbolizes death, right?
Yes. So if I wear something white to see my grandma, woof, disowned. So
Not talking to you ever again.
yes. So there is a little bit of symbolism in that. I want to remember that this would mean something to an Asian audience, but at the same time, it also needs to work for the fact that the show is for everybody. So the silhouette is made for an international audience, and the color, for those who know, will mean something: the death of a dynasty, something about the end of her legacy with Big Sun, with her past. So there's a lot of softness in the inside layer, the tailoring for power, and the white for people that know what's up.
Yeah. Are you surprised I knew that?
Good job.
Thank you. So one other question for you. There are a lot of heavy stunts in your show. And a lot of female assassins, right? Right. Okay. How did you create those designs and still stay authentic to the culture?
I was saying to Spencer earlier that I have to strike a balance between, staying authentic to the culture and also what reads globally and what reads just to an Asian audience. I mean, I have to be honest, I did ask my high school friends. I just came back from Asia, and my high school friends were like, there are some things I don't really get. And I'm like, that's not for you. That's for everybody else. Don't think about it. And there is a really cheesy quote. Who said this to me? Allison, my ACD, because she's my only reason I'm still sane. And then she's like, you gotta know the rules before you can break them. So you know all the rules. Well, I don't. I pretend I do because I just type on YouTube and do my research. And then I break them. So there are things that are true to the culture, and there are things that I took some creative liberty with it. And then I will send it to my parents to verify, to see if this is too far or not too far. My budget is reined in by my supervisor, Michelle, over here. Thank you.
Shout out to all the supervisors who keep us on track. Okay, so this is a question for the group. So do you guys have a favorite vendor that you use for these particular projects that collaborated with you, or anybody you'd like to give a shout out that helped you really with the process of this? Lou!
A couple in New York, the Manhattan Vintage Show that happens 4 times a year, and it's so amazing. It's like 180 vendors under one roof, and we would go in, and in the first one, we would just go collect everybody's cards, tell them what we were working on, and then they would all call and bring things, whatever. But here in LA, Richard Wainwright, who does the Pickwick Bowl and the what's the other one? Oh, Current Affair. And all the vendors would go and clean up there because they're amazing. Everybody works so hard and carries all their wonderful treasures and sits out in the sun for 8 hours. And we get a lot of treasures from them. So I do want to give Arcade a shout out. But can I just say one thing? Sorry, guys, but I forgot to thank Leah Katz-Nelson, who is a friend and costume designer who came in on Feud with me when we had gotten through prep, and like I said, it kept growing and growing. And she came in one of our other shows was blowing up and I had to keep leaving to go fix that and come back. So she came on and was a real rock for me. And I gave her design credit alongside me because she deserved it. And then she got a movie, which was great, and had to leave. And I brought Rudy Nance in her place, and he finished up the show with me as a costume designer. So I wanted to make sure I gave out that shout out.
Always nice to give a shout out to your designers and ACDs and the whole crew. Okay, anybody else have a vendor they'd like to shout? Oh, okay, Alex.
Actually, one that Annie and I were both. Because I also had similar experiences where I would have an actress in a costume and it was shot, and then we would get script pages and that actress would fall into the pool or would have to get into a car crash or something. And this post establishing, it was next to impossible, obviously in period, to go to the Beverly Center and buy a second outfit. So we employed CAD/FAB quite a bit to print vintage prints and to replicate a lot, not just copy the print of the actual outfit that we needed to multiply, but they did a million different things for us, and we would be absolutely dead without them. And I do believe that they're one of the few left on the West Coast that do that, which is super sad. So if anybody wants to branch out and make some extra money, we need a fabric printer desperately. Yeah.
Definitely a dying art on this side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes, Allison.
I'd like to thank DHL Shipping Company.
Excellent.
For shipping me boxes every single day. Literally. But actually also I have some jewelry vendors, and also because I do contemporary and, stylized contemporary, I have some really incredible jewelry vendors, Parker Thatch and Claire V, the amazing Claire V, who always, no matter what time of day I call them or send them an email, I have things the next day. And honestly, that is invaluable to have those kind of relationships.
So speaking of relationships, we all seem to know each other in some sort of capacity or have used the same vendors or talk about the same things. Do any of you have a story about one another? Or, well, you and I are on the diversity committee together, Vera and I. I will say that Sarah was on my team when I did Two Broke Girls. She was a set costumer, and now she's like a big time designer. So that's super cool.
She was my assistant as well.
See? And then I was Lou's assistant. And then one of my favorite stories about Lou, which she hates that I'm going to tell really quickly, is it's a good story. It's a good story. I'll make it fast. It was on Nip Tuck the first season. And that's when Paramount still had a costume house, which they no longer have. And Lou wanted me to pull all these bathing suits for a big Miami scene. And I pulled her this amazing, which I thought, rack of bathing suits. And it was filled to the brim. And she came over, and Lou, being Lou, just very nicely explained to me that, why would this work? And I couldn't really say why it would work or wouldn't work. And she was like, Tracy, always remember quality over quantity. And I said, okay, Lou. And me being all of like 22 or 30, something like that.
You were just on a Western costume.
Yeah. So I was like 22. Yeah. And I felt like I let Lou down, and I was so sad. So they have these shoe bins, right? They're made out of wood. And as you can tell, I'm 5 feet tall. So I get into a shoe bin with the shoes, you guys, on a shelf. And I'm trying not to cry, but I'm like crying. And Lou comes to find me. She's like, where are you? And she finds me.
I peeked into the box of shoes.
And I'm crying. And Lou's like, why are you crying? What's wrong? And so Lou, being Lou, almost in tears as well. And Lou's like, I let you down, quality over quantity. And she was like, get out of the shoes. So long story short, she gets me out of the shoes. And of course, she was just like, this is how you learn. And so to everyone out there, when you're going through something and it may not have like been the right exact thing and someone is giving you advice, it's really advice. They're not
Don't
criticizing
get in with the shoes.
Don't jump into the box of dirty shoes like I did, please. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I love Lou. And she also taught me one other thing, which is attention to detail, such like jewelry and accessories really like complete an outfit or are very individual for characterization. And to this day, people always say that that's one of my strong points, that I find very perfect pieces to make an individual. And it's usually some sort of jewelry. And that comes from Lou. So quality over quantity, everybody.
I have a funny story about, well, it's an appropriate story with the group here. Alex and I were she was pulling Palm Rail and I was pulling Feud at the same time. And I would go to Western to pull and I would see her racks. And at first it was kind of like, oh shit, somebody got to the 60s stock before me. And then I saw it was her. I'm like, oh, okay. But it was a sea of like bright pastels and a lot of print. And then I was okay because ours was more like the color of these flowers, like really pale, sophisticated, subdued, graceful colors. And it was fun to watch how we could both be pulling for the same time period, 2 different parts of the country, but have a whole different look and color palette. And I thought that was an interesting story.
Well, it's always nice to run into your fellow friends at the costume house in general. So good story. I have one last question, and then we'll go to the crowd to see if anybody has some questions for our panelists. I just want to point out that when we have these iconic female leads, women tend to have to wear skimpier clothes and do all these stunts or run or like do, things that our male counterparts don't always have to do. They're usually like in suits or, they're covered. And so did you guys have to deal with that at all with your female characters? Like, were there any like stunts or any sort of like female clothing, like a dress or something that would normally inhibit somebody from doing whatever they're doing, but we had to make it work?
I do. Sorry. I'm talking about that. Diane Lane and Treat Williams found out that they had to do a sex scene and weren't told about it. It wasn't in their contracts and they were really panicked when the script came out. And both of them looked white when I went in their trailers, and they're both of a certain age and they didn't want to do a sex scene and they didn't want to be clothed to make it look like they're older people trying to be sexy or whatever. And it was a long conversation, but it was a beautiful thing in that they worked it out together. And Diane, we worked in finding her beautiful pieces that could make her feel sexy, but cover the certain places that she wasn't comfortable with. And it was like a definitely collaboration, and with Treat as well. And we worked with it to make them both comfortable and then go to the camera operator and the director and shoot it in ways that they both felt comfortable, but that didn't look like it was made for TV, that it felt real.
That's things that, when you're the viewer, you don't necessarily think about, but we're always trying to make sure that our actors are comfortable, and sex scenes are always the toughest, I find. And then having to go to your DP and saying like, can we only shoot from this angle for whatever reason? Okay, so I will turn it over to the crowd. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask our panelists? A question right up front in the red pants right here.
Hello. My question is for Lou. How did you find your way into costume? How did you first start?
Truly being in the right place at the right time. I lived in Minneapolis and started hanging out with this guy who did lights for bands, and I'd go visit him on tour and would see that there was a wardrobe department that were dressing the band. I was in my 20s and I'd really never even been out of Minnesota before. I flew to Tokyo with this band that he was with. And I just would hang out with the wardrobe department during sound check, and I could sew and shop. And a couple of years went by and I would go out a lot. And one of the stylists had to leave to go do Kiss. And they said, well, how about you take over? I'm like, no, I just sell vintage in Minneapolis. And then I went on the road for 6 years with 3 different bands. And then I landed back in Minneapolis, and Carol Ramsey came to Minneapolis to do a film. And I interviewed to be her PA. And so I'll size your shoes, I'll babysit your kid, whatever. I want to learn how to do this. And did that one movie and knew this is what I wanted to do. But I hadn't intended in being a designer. I was perfectly happy being Carol Ramsey's assistant.
And that leads us to, what was the first show? Ryan Murphy, starts with a P.
Popular, yeah.
Yes.
You were there.
I was there. Yeah. Long time ago. Any other questions from the crowd? Oh, Haley.
I wanted to ask what you guys feel like has been the biggest transition from 10 years ago to now in our departments, just because there are a lot of new people, and like I know a lot of people are struggling with the way the industry's gone. So I just want to know what your thoughts are from 10 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago to current day.
Well, I think the main one that we all can say is budgets. We all know that like the budgets are shrinking and that they still want more. They still have a lot on the page. That's the script. But we don't necessarily have the money to do everything that they want. So we're trying to come up with creative ways to do it. I think that's one of the biggest challenges right now.
And the block shooting and the new like shooting in like block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4. But in block 3, we see it, we're shooting at that same restaurant. So it's just jumping. You just have to be so much more prepared now for all in TV. I'm talking about all 10, 13 episodes, where it used to be we're focusing on episode 1 and 2 and 3. And that for me, a big difference.
I feel like the last minute casting, that battle is over. I don't even bother fighting it. I'm just trying to figure out now what I do in prep, because on my last, 4 shows, people are coming in a day or two before your biggest characters. So it's really, I'm really trying to think, how can I reorganize prep so that I can almost be doing 4 different commercials, but make it work inside of the budget and the manpower. And no one's ever going to admit there's going to be last minute casting. That's the other thing. You're like, I'm going to need my cast before. It's going to cost money. Yes, you're going to get it. And just, you don't.
Well, if you work with Ryan Johnson, they say everything's going to be last minute. Like they tell you up front. And I'm like, oh, okay. So if I even get a whiff of who they're even thinking about, I start to call my costume community. And people give me sizes, and I just start shopping it. So when Adrian Brody shows up, which has happened to me, I had clothes for him because he's not the average size. It's like, oh, and he works the next day, arrives today, works the next morning. Yeah, sure, no problem, and very stylized. Okay. So yes, the costume community is super important. I love that we all can get together and we're, comfortable to call each other and ask each other for sizes. I think that that's the best resource that we have is each other. The reason that we are all costume designers is that we're really great at figuring things out. I think where there's a will, there's a way. And no matter what they throw at us, which we know on every show, every film, every commercial, they're always throwing last minute things at us. And for some reason, we always figure it out. So I'm sure that we'll figure this out too. Any other questions? Okay. We'll start there.
Hi, ladies. First, it is so much fun to connect with the personalities behind the costume design of the shows. The elegance, the humor, the wit, the charm, the funk. It's awesome. All right. So thank you. Thank you very much. And you too. Lou, what is it like with Ryan Murphy when he says, hey, Lou, so the show is going to be about gargoyles, Halloween, a hotel, and blah, blah, blah. What is that process like?
He also says, and I want to make it a fungal doll at Halloween, so make it iconic.
You guys have worked together so many years.
24 years, yeah.
Oh, just give us an idea. Like, my God, his shows.
First, I think literally it's panic. Like, they're going to finally find out I don't know what I'm doing. That's the truth. Like, oh, well, it was good when it lasted. But you have to sit with it, and we have a language. He uses certain words, and that's what tips me off. Like, he always wants it to take the audience and be both a puzzle and intriguing, and then flip it and not be what you thought it was going to be. So it's easy. It really, I don't know how to explain it other than, again, as good as your crew, because we'll have a think tank. Like everybody, we sit in a circle and we talk about it. And then, I don't know if anybody remembers Bob Sparkman, but Bob Sparkman, he moved to Texas, but he was the best, because we would just sit on the floor of the dressing room going, but it could be this. We'd flip through magazines, and especially earlier on, like the internet, we didn't use it that much. But I don't know, it just kind of, and then after 11 seasons of American Horror Story, it does kind of like, how do we even, well, we did that in season 2. We can't do that. We did it in 7. So it's, sometimes it comes to me in the middle of the night, but it's a stressor, actually. Like, how can I come up with something new?
We also drink wine.
Yeah, there's
On the
Yeah.
top. We,
Yes,
on
yes,
Fridays, we'd have a little wine at the end of the night.
It was a
At the
nice
end of the-
tradition.
Yes, it was.
I have to say something real quick because I see him in the audience. When you said about vendors, do give a shout out, and we have the Beverly Center, and we know that we end up doing a lot of online shopping because it's in a hurry, and we have to remember to put our feet on the ground and shop and keep the shops open. And Traffic has been here as long as I've been shopping, and they still keep great quality, amazing things that aren't in the department stores, and they're so lovely to work with. And I have literally been working with them since before my kid was born. And I just had to give a shout out because I see him here.
So really quick, thank you guys so much for today. And, my really quick question, thank you so much, Trace. With everything happening within the world and the industry, who have been some of your biggest influences throughout your entire career?
Lou, Ryan Murphy. He still inspires me every single day. He writes 5 scripts at a time. We're producing 6 shows right now. It doesn't stop. We were in a meeting the other day and they were talking about, well, we should push. And he said, no, there's people in this town who aren't working. We need to make this. We need to keep our crews working. He inspires me in many different ways. He can look across a room on a set and go, I don't see any women behind the camera. Or it's just, he inspires me.
Hi. This question is, I guess, really for Allison and Gigi, but I know all of you do contemporary work. I'm really interested in the research process. Like, you're in Australia, you're trying to create Florida. I don't know if you've ever lived there or been immersed in it, but what are your go-to research sources for creating a visual world to discuss with actors and directors?
I really like to muse off real people because I find real people are so much more interesting than anything, obviously. And that's hard sometimes, but I usually do find it. Right, Christine? We're always searching, like, who gives that, who contains elements of this character that we're trying to, focus on, right? And once you find that real person, you always have to riff off. And with every actor also brings an element to the character. So like someone else was saying, when you get in that room, sometimes you've planned out something and then that person comes in that room and they bring an energy or a presence to the character that maybe you didn't expect. So you maybe will adjust and pull back in that way to level it out, right? I don't even usually know. I mean, headshots help, but until I'm in the room with somebody, I don't know for sure where we're going to land, where we're going to find it, so because they bring, so the person brings so much, the actor brings so much. So generally I start with a baseline of a real person that I find, and we do a board and we take that person and we find different levels of that person. And then somewhere in that world, but I have to say, and I'm always a little bit surprised too, that my original boards, they almost always stay really true, even though I don't even see it sometimes as the show is progressing. I'll go back to my boards and I'll be like, yeah, that's what we were doing the whole time. But it does just start with all the images, and finding the images is challenging, although, the internet has been quite helpful in that way, right? Do you guys remember magazines?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Libraries, bookstores, magazines. That was like very time consuming. Anyway.
Do you stalk people on the street?
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
I do that.
Oh, yeah. I love people on the
In
street.
the city, and there's so many illegal photos I've taken.
I know so many.
That's what I was going to say.
You have to get good at taking them without them realizing you're taking them, or you can ask, but sometimes that's awkward. And one time I almost got into big trouble, actually. Someone got really mad at me. I had to be like, I just thought you looked so great.
Oh, I never ask.
I know, but that's what I didn't ask. And somebody was like, why'd you take a picture of me? And it got a little weird.
Yeah, I
But
always
yeah.
pretend I'm taking a photo of
course.
myself, and then I'm taking a photo of someone else because I want to commit it to memory. You know what I mean? I want to be able to reference it later. Yes, and you're right. There's nothing better than like real life, walking down the street. And my favorite is when you actually pitch that idea to like a producer or director, and they're like, "This isn't real. Like no one would dress like that." And you're like, "Ha ha ha! I got a photo, dude." And they're like, "Oh."
Or my friends, or my family, or my parents, or my parents, or you know, a celebrity in their real life sometimes is a good way to find it. It's just, you know, has to be public enough for there to be photos if you didn't know them, but it's out there. It's out there.
Yes. And as far as for me with contemporary, I when I did Poker Face, I did a board, and yes, of course, the first board was the board that worked, and there was actually a jacket on there that Natasha ended up wearing. But I always am trying to one up myself. So I do a lot of research on like limited runs or small brands that like people haven't really seen that's not everywhere. And then either I'll contact that brand or I'll just buy a couple of things because obviously I want to support them because they're a small business. But to me, it's always trying to find the most obscure sort of like thing that no one else has really done or seen yet. And then it makes it interesting. Or putting together two things that like somebody would never put together, you know? So I'm always just trying to like find things that I gravitate to that, like even on Instagram, you know, you see a brand and you're like, oh, let me check that out. I've never heard of them. And then you end up finding like the perfect piece. I mean, you know, you never know. You never know where you're going to find it.
Instagram people are great. Instagram.
Yeah.
I find characters on Instagram all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And brands you'd never heard of or jewelry. I think it's kind of great. So that's what I like to do. All right. Oh, Terry Gordon, do we have a question?
This is for all of you. We are in the fabulous Beverly Center that we have all used, loved, and adored. Well, I have for my 40 years in this business. And could you address studio services? Because that has been a lifesaver so many times. I just wonder how that has saved you. And Bloomingdale's especially has been one of our biggest supporters in this. So yeah, I'd like to hear how it's helped you.
I mean, I can speak to that, or if you'd like to, go for it.
Well, I was just going to say, like, speaking of last minute casting, you know, a lot of times when you get all this last minute casting, you only have so much credit on your credit cards. The accounting department is only going to give you so much credit. You don't have time to go in and fight the fight. Like, you really can't spend a lot of money, and studio services is like 1,000% invaluable, because those are those moments when you're like, this big celebrity is coming in. I need to get something great on the rack. Your accountant doesn't care, you know, but like your studio services is going to totally help you out. I feel like we would really be nothing without them, you know?
You know, you may need multiples and you need them fast, and you can always call studio service and you're like, do you have 5 of these suits? Like, and they'll check it out for you, and then maybe they have it, or they'll tell you what store does have it. So yes, they're definitely invaluable to helping us get what we need and getting it fast.
Yeah, we missed them in Australia for sure. But they were great. Like, we would have things sent and we would call and be like, we're in Australia. We need to extend. We need to extend. We need to extend. And they always were working with us. So absolutely invaluable.
All right. I think we're getting close to wrapping it up, unless anybody else has any questions. Oh, okay. We'll take these last 2 and then we're done.
I'm going to stand up because I'm kind of short. My name is Raquel. I'm a student, and I know there's a lot of students in this crowd, so it's not really a question, but I just wanted to know if you guys had any kind of advice or any words of wisdom for us that are just starting out.
I think we all have something we could say to that. I'll make it fast. Just tell everybody what you want to do. Make sure that you're clear about what you want to do. If you want to start in the costume department, start it at, start as a PA and work your way up. Because that way you'll actually learn like all the different things that somebody needs to do in order to become a costume designer. I feel like I'm a better costume designer because I was a costumer for years. And reach out to people via the internet. I mean, I've had a lot of people DM me and I've tried to help them along the way. So, I think it's really important to put yourself out there because no one's going to know what you want to do or even how to help you if you don't A, ask, or B, put yourself out there.
I want to echo that and say everyone should really try every job in the costume department, be it set costuming, be it you don't have to be the best seamstress, best tailor in the world, but know how to do it. Know the basics of aging, dyeing, colors, texture. Like don't skip steps. Know what your supervisor is doing, know how the budget works. It will give you so much more leverage in a production meeting when all the producers are trying to bully you. So you know what you're talking about. It's like a chef not knowing their ingredients if you don't know every aspect of your job.
I was going to say, realize that nothing you're doing is small or doesn't matter. Like even when you're a PA, it's amazing. You're actually collecting everybody's valued resources. And I feel like the only reason I'm a costume designer is because I was willing to work really hard at everything and go start to finish. Like when I find someone who will follow through on a task, even though they may not even be so experienced, but if I know if I ask that person to do something, they will do everything they can to get it done. And if they can't get it done, they will come to me. I'll hire that person over a really experienced person who doesn't have the same amount of follow through.
And I can vouch for Sarah. She's a very hard worker and definitely has follow through. A lot of follow through.
I also went to school for costume design. And I think one of the things coming up is that you have to make yourself invaluable. And kind of like what Sarah said, we see everything. So if you think that your job doesn't matter because you're a PA and you're getting lunch, the hustle is important in our job because we don't have the same job security of a 9-to-5. So how can you make yourself someone memorable, someone worth hiring? And we have a lot of personalities in here. So it's like, how can you be in a room and kind of exist with everyone and work with everyone? Because nowadays there's content, but it's like, are you going to enjoy showing up to work? And are you going to like want to work with these people? Because then your boss is going to hire you again.
One thing that really helped me was I found an amazing mentor, and she's here, Sharon Davis.
Yay, Sharon.
Yeah. The incredible Sharon Davis.
Will you tell us a little bit of what Sharon has done? Just a little bit, because there's a lot.
She's won Oscars, Dreamgirls, and
she also just designed something on Broadway.
On Broadway, yeah, Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
What was it called?
The Wiz.
The Wiz.
Yes.
The Wiz. And wait, Devil in the Blue Dress. The Help.
She's done
what
a
else?
lot.
So many.
She's
Sharon's
amazing.
incredible. I'm so blessed. She found me in Minneapolis. I was her PA. She's also Minneapolis. And she said, you need to move to Los Angeles. You're going to work on this now. You're going to be my PA. I did like 3 shows as a PA. She said, now you have to get in the union. She put me in a costume house. She made me do set, which I hated. And then she really put me through. She said it's so important to work in every single position in a department if you're going to be a leader of a team. And I thank her all the time with my entire being for that advice because I know what it's like to be in all these positions, and it makes me better at my job. It makes people enjoy working with me because I understand what they're doing. I get good teams, and I feel really lucky to have been found by Sharon Davis in Minneapolis.
All right, I think we had that one last question from the gentleman in the back, and then we all can have some drinks. And
I had a question about Palm Royale and the color in that show. The coloring is really high contrast, really bright in a lot of the scenes. And I was wondering how much of that did you know ahead of time? Because obviously some is in post, but how much of that did you know ahead of time going into it to pick your fabrics and garments to really work within that high contrast, really bright environment?
A lot of it was practical. And myself and the production designer, John Carlos, decided in the very beginning that we would stick to these really stark palette rules. So the Palm Royale itself had a very, very limited color palette, bright pastels, lots of whites, really fresh, bright, sparkly fabrics. And then when you get to West Palm, it was definitely a lot more working class, wettier, a nice little patina, like off greens and sage and salmons. And then there was glimpses of what was really happening in 1969 and that sort of, the revolution, the fashion revolution, the youth culture, the sort of denim, macrame, earth tones, kind of hippie culture was happening a little bit in our story. So that when you saw the characters that sort of embodied the Palm Royale and that society walk into, say, an environment in West Palm Beach, they were always a fish out of water. So creating those really strong palettes in the beginning with myself, set decorator, and the production designer, we could sort of heighten everything and make you really understand where you were, to what time and place you were in, anywhere in the story.
And then did you, because of the lighting at the actual Palm Royale was so extreme, I found, like in a lot of scenes, to really give that contrast.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, did you take that into account to then find examples of fabrics that were kind of a step beyond what you might actually see in that time period to really emphasize that? Or was the lighting standing alone to bring out your design?
I think the lighting really enhanced what we were doing. I think that it was really a gift to have the DP that shot the first 2 episodes really came down early, like first couple weeks of prep, and kind of went through the racks and absorb what the show was and the colors that we were using. And that's pretty rare. We're in service a lot of times to them. And in this instance, we had we had a lot of trust. Our showrunner really trusted us and let us kind of do our own thing. And I will say that having that trust and freedom and having somebody actually let you do your job instead of micromanage you and sort of think they know better than you or kind of give constant feedback is sort of, it's not always helpful. It's really nice to sort of be trusted. So, and then I could sort of tell the incredible Valerie Kaiser, who is our head cutter fitter, who just is the most brilliant. I don't even want to tell these women how brilliant she is. We were able to really push it as far as we wanted to and get so much joy out of the daily gift that was pulling and building for Palm Royale and building that world, because we had the trust of our showrunner and the producers and the directors. And that's unfortunately rarer and rarer and rarer these days, especially in television. I hope that answered your question. I don't know if it...
Awesome. Okay, so in closing, I'd like to thank the Beverly Center, Bloomingdale's, for sponsoring the food. And Don Laundress is sponsoring the alcohol, and the Costume Designers Guild for a wonderful event. Thank you all for coming, and please enjoy the drinks and the music.